In the summer of 1988, a 16-year-old boy carried a coffee can full of cash into a New Mexico courthouse and bought a hill every adult in the room had already thrown away. Before noon, they laughed at him. Before winter, the same dead hill was being valued at $22 million. And the strange part is, the boy did not guess, he measured. His name was Ethan Bell, and the land sat 15 miles outside Silver City, New Mexico, where the Mimbres Valley dries out into pale grass, juniper, and broken volcanic rock. If you stand out there in July, the heat does not fall from the sky, it rises from the ground. It moves through your boots first, then your knees, then your chest, until even breathing feels like work. The parcel was 36 acres of slope and stone on the edge of the Little Burro Mountains. No well, no shade. No road worth calling a road. Just a rusted cattle gate, a collapsed line shack, and a blue-gray ridge locals called Smelter Hill because old-timers said the rock had burned funny under a torch. Nobody wanted it. That was the whole mistake. Ethan was not the kind of boy people noticed. He was narrow-shouldered, quiet, and always a little dusty, with black hair that never lay flat and a pair of wire-framed glasses repaired at the hinge with copper wire. His mother, Lila Bell, worked mornings in a bakery and evenings at the county hospital laundry. They lived in a two-room cinder-block house behind a shuttered gas station at the west end of town. His father, Aaron Bell, had been the one who understood rocks. Aaron was not a prospector in the romantic sense. He did not believe in lucky strikes or campfire stories about Spanish gold. He had worked as a field technician for a copper outfit near Tyrone, and he kept his faith in sample bags, ruled notebooks, and numbers written in pencil. On Sundays, when Ethan was small, Aaron drove him out to Smelter Hill in a faded green Dodge with a cracked windshield. They walked the slope with a rock hammer, a compass, and lunch wrapped in wax paper. Aaron would crouch, break a chip from the outcrop, hold it to the light, and say the same thing almost every time. Paper tells you what men agreed to, stone tells you what happened. Ethan never forgot it. Then, in February of 1985, a haul truck rolled in a rainstorm outside the mine yard, and Aaron Bell did not come home. Ethan was 13. After the funeral, Lila put Aaron's notebooks into 2 peach boxes and slid them beneath her bed. The insurance money did not go far. A burial plot, 2 hospital bills, the rest of the truck loan, and the kind of small debts that do not look dangerous until a family loses a paycheck. By the time the bills stopped coming, a little more than $2,900 remained. Lila opened a savings account in Ethan's name and called it college money. But grief has a way of making houses quiet. Lila stopped talking about Aaron because talking made her stop moving. And if she stopped moving, the rent did not get paid. So Ethan did what quiet boys do when the adults have no room left for pain. He read. Night after night, after his mother fell asleep in her work clothes, Ethan pulled those peach boxes from under the bed and carried the notebooks to the kitchen table. He read under a yellow bulb while moths tapped the window screen and freight trains groaned somewhere beyond town. At first, the notebooks might as well have been written in another language. Dike swarm, lepidolite, beryl halo, tantalum spike, yttrium trace. But Aaron had drawn maps, careful maps, not pretty ones, but useful ones. 11 dikes marked in red pencil, 5 cross-sections of the same ridge, a sketched fault line running like a crooked scar through the middle of the 36 acres. At the bottom of one page, circled twice, Aaron had written 4 words. Not copper, battery stone. That phrase stayed in Ethan's head. Battery stone, he did not know what it meant yet. But he knew his father had not been chasing a ghost. Aaron Bell had measured things. He had brought home samples wrapped in grocery paper, each one labeled with a date, a dike number, and a little arrow showing north. Ethan began laying them out on his bedroom floor. By spring of 1988, he could match most of the samples to the map. Then the county letter came. It arrived in a white envelope from the Grant County treasurer, folded around words Lila had to read twice before she sat down. 3 years of delinquent property tax, total due, with penalty and fees, $2,746. If payment was not made, the property would be sold at public auction on the courthouse steps on the second Saturday in June. Lila put the letter on the table like it was too heavy to hold. Ethan stood in the doorway, still in his school clothes, and watched his mother surrender without making a sound. That night, he read the letter again and again. 36 acres. Smelter Hill. Auction. Cash or cashier's check only. He thought about the bank account. He thought about college. He thought about the red pencil marks in his father's notebooks. Then he thought about his father on that ridge, turning a piece of blue-gray rock in his hand. Paper tells you what men agreed to, stone tells you what happened. The next morning, Ethan waited until Lila had poured coffee into a chipped mug and tied her work shoes. Then he said, "I want to use the college money." Lila did not ask for what. She already knew. She turned very slowly from the counter. Her face looked older in the kitchen light. "Ethan," she said, "that hill is nothing but bad road and taxes." He said, "Dad did not think so. Your father also thought he would live long enough to prove it." That line hit the room hard enough to stop both of them. Lila looked down at the coffee. Ethan looked at the floor. After a while he said, "One time, Mom, trust the notebooks one time." Lila closed her eyes. She was a woman with 2 jobs, 1 son, and no extra room for foolishness. But she had also been married to Aaron Bell. She had watched him come home with dust in his eyebrows and numbers on his cuffs. She knew the difference between hope and measurement. Finally, she said, "If you do this, we do it clean. You count every dollar in front of the clerk. You get a receipt, and if we lose it, we do not blame your father." Ethan nodded. The auction came 4 weeks later. Silver City was already hot by 10 in the morning. The courthouse flag hung loose on its pole. Cottonwood leaves flickered without wind. About 30 people had gathered on the steps, most of them ranchers, tax sale regulars, and men who wore nice boots to make people think they owned more than they did. Ethan came with his mother in the green Dodge. The passenger floor still smelled faintly of oil and old cigarettes, the way it had when Aaron drove it. He wore a white shirt Lila had ironed twice and jeans too short at the ankle. In his hands was a dented Folgers coffee can with $2,900 inside, counted in 20s, 10s, and a few 5s. Lila stayed in the truck. She said she did not want to hear strangers laugh. Ethan walked up alone. Near the courthouse railing, stood the man who would become the loudest wrong person in the story. His name was Nolan Voss. He was a land broker from Las Cruces, 46 years old, broad in the shoulders, polished in the smile, and dressed like a man who had studied working people from a hotel window. Pressed jeans, white shirt, silver belt buckle. Ostrich skin boots without a scratch on them. With him were 2 associates, Merrill Gant, a lawyer, and Peter Sloan, who financed subdivisions that never quite got built. They had come to buy roadside parcels closer to town. Places that might someday hold storage units, trailer pads, or a convenience store if the highway traffic shifted. Smelter Hill was not on their list. It should have stayed that way. The county clerk read the rules from a clipboard. Parcel after parcel went fast, some sold for taxes owed, some drew little bidding fights among men who knew irrigation, fencing, and road access better than they knew their own blood pressure. Then the clerk called the parcel number for the Bell land. 36 acres. Unimproved hillside. Little Burrow foothills. Minimum bid, $2,746. Ethan stepped forward. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. $2,900. The clerk looked over his glasses. Cash. Ethan lifted the coffee can. A few people laughed before they even meant to. Nolan Voss turned. At first, he looked entertained, then he understood the boy was serious, and his smile widened. Well now, Nolan said, loud enough for the steps to hear, somebody brought his lunch money. More laughter. Merrill Gant bent his head, grinning into his hand. Peter Sloane said, what are you planning to build up there, son? A goat church. That one got the crowd. Ethan held the can tighter. The clerk asked for additional bids. No one spoke. Nolan looked at the parcel sheet, then back at Ethan. He gave an exaggerated sigh. I hate to ruin a young man's dream, he said, but I suppose I could go 2910 just for the entertainment. He waited. He wanted the crowd to feel his power. Then he shrugged. Let him have his hill. The clerk struck the gavel. Sold to Ethan Bell for $2,900. Ethan walked to the table and counted the money. His hands shook on the first stack. By the second stack, they stopped. The clerk gave him a yellow receipt and a transfer packet that still needed Lila's guardian signature. Ethan folded the receipt and put it in his shirt pocket. As he passed Nolan Voss, Nolan leaned close and said, almost kindly, boy, when you get tired of owning rocks, come find me. I might give you $3,000 for it if I am feeling sentimental. Ethan looked at him. Not angry, not brave. Just still. Then he walked back to the truck. Lila signed where the clerk had marked. She read the receipt twice, pressed it flat against her knee, and drove home without speaking until the courthouse disappeared behind them. Only then did she say, your father better have known what he was doing. Ethan looked out the window at the blue smear of the hills. So do I. Now here is the part that separates a lucky story from a real one. Ethan did not wait for someone to discover the land for him. He got up before dawn almost every morning that summer. He walked Smelter Hill with Aaron's notebook in a canvas mailbag and a hammer that had belonged to his grandfather. He marked each dike with survey tape. He took chips from fresh faces, not weathered surfaces, because Aaron had written that weather lies first. By the end of July, Ethan had 52 samples arranged in shoebox lids across his bedroom floor. He logged them by dike number, depth, color, crystal size, and magnetic response using a cheap compass from the hardware store. Most people would have seen rocks. Ethan saw patterns. The purple mica showed up strongest near the fault, the pale crystals thickened downslope. The heaviest pieces came from the 4th and 7th dikes, the ones Aaron had circled most often. When Ethan rubbed the broken face of sample 7-C with his thumb, tiny silver flakes glittered through the dust. He did not know the value, but he knew the hill was repeating itself, and repetition is one of the ways stone tells the truth. Aaron's oldest notebook had a phone number on the inside cover. Beside it was a name Ethan had heard only once at the dinner table, Dr. Elena Vargas, New Mexico Tech, Geochemistry. Ethan called from the pay phone outside a feed store because the house phone had been disconnected the month before. She secretary answered first. Ethan asked for Dr. Vargas. He expected to be told no. Instead, after nearly a minute of hold music, a woman's voice came on the line. Elena Vargas. Ethan swallowed. My name is Ethan Bell. My father was Aaron Bell. He sent you some Smelter Hill samples, in 1984. There was a pause so long Ethan thought the line had gone dead. Then Dr. Vargas said, Aaron Bell was your father? Yes, man. How old are you now? 16. Another pause. What do you have, Ethan? He told her, not dramatically. Not well, but carefully. He told her about the maps, the red dike marks, the 52 samples, the words battery stone, and the 36 acres he had bought back at auction. Dr. Vargas listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Do not throw anything away. Do not let anyone photograph those notebooks. Box 12 of the cleanest samples and mail them to my lab, keep the rest locked somewhere dry." Ethan wrote down the address on the side of a feed receipt. The next morning, he packed 12 rocks in newspaper, wrapped the box in brown paper, and mailed them to Socorro. The postal clerk asked what was inside. Ethan said, "Samples." "What kind?" Ethan looked at the box. "Family kind." The first letter came 3 weeks later. Not a phone call. A letter, typed on New Mexico Tech letterhead, signed in blue ink, and written in careful sentences that made Lila sit down before she reached the second paragraph. The samples contained unusual concentrations of lithium-bearing lepidolite, tantalum minerals, beryl, and measurable rare earth elements. Dr. Vargas wished to visit the property with 2 colleagues and portable field equipment before making any recommendation. Ethan read the sentence 6 times. Lila read one word. Unusual. On September 3rd, Dr. Vargas arrived in a white university suburban with a geologist named Paul Herrick and a graduate student named Mina Chow. They brought a portable scintillometer, sample bags, hammers, and a field X-ray fluorescence unit in a hard plastic case. Dr. Vargas was in her late 50s, compact, brown-skinned, gray-haired, and calm, in the way of people who do not waste words because they have seen too many rocks outlast too many arguments. She shook Ethan's hand at the gate. "You have Aaron's eyes," she said. "And his terrible handwriting." For the first time in 3 years, Ethan laughed. They spent 9 hours on the hill, they walked every dike, they opened fresh faces with a sledge. They checked samples in the shade of the suburban tailgate. Mina wrote numbers on a clipboard. Paul kept walking back to sample station 7 and shaking his head. Nobody said the word money. Not once. Late in the afternoon, when the light had gone copper on the ridge, Dr. Vargas sat with Ethan on a slab of blue-gray stone above the lined shack. Lila stood nearby with her arms folded. Dr. Vargas removed her hat. "Ethan, I need to say this carefully, field readings are not a mine. They are not a bank check, they are not a promise." Ethan nodded. "But your father was right to keep looking here. These pegmatite dikes are not ordinary. The lithium and tantalum signatures are consistent, and the beryllium halo is stronger than I expected. There are also rare earth traces that make the deposit more interesting than a small lithium showing." Lila's face changed. Ethan asked, "Is it worth anything?" Dr. Vargas looked at the ridge before she answered. "If the lab confirms what the field equipment suggests, this is not a hobby claim. It is a developable mineral deposit." "How much?" Dr. Vargas was quiet. "With the right company, structured as royalties instead of a sale, the long-term value could be in the high teens. Possibly more than 20 million. Lila covered her mouth with one hand. Ethan looked down at the stone beneath his boots. It had been there the day men laughed. It had been there when his father died. It had been there while tax letters crossed desks and brokers crossed parcels off lists. The stone had not changed. Only the people looking at it had. The formal lab report arrived in November. It did not read like a miracle. It read like a verdict. 36 acres of pegmatite hosted lithium, tantalum, beryllium, and rare earth-bearing mineralization. 11 mapped dikes. 7 with consistent grade, 3 strong enough for immediate development study. Estimated 20-year royalty potential between $18 and $24 million, depending on recovery and market conditions. That was the language: dry, careful, explosive. The news did not break in a newspaper at first. It moved the way mineral news always moves, by phone calls between men who pretend they are not asking what they are asking. A Denver group called Lila and offered to fly them out for a meeting. She said no. A Phoenix company sent flowers and a purchase proposal in the same week. She threw away the flowers and put the proposal in a drawer. Then Nolan Voss came to the house. It was a Sunday afternoon in December. The air had gone cold, and the dust road held tire tracks from the last rain. Nolan arrived in a black Cadillac, with leather seats and a smile that had lost its humor. He knocked on the screen door. Lila opened it halfway. Nolan removed his hat. "Mrs. Bell, I believe your son and I met in June." Ethan stepped into the room behind her. Nolan looked at him and adjusted quickly. "Young man, I came to make you a serious offer." Nobody invited him in. He opened the folder. "I am prepared to pay $150,000 cash for Smelter Hill. No delays. No lawyers dragging things out. That is a life-changing amount of money for a family in your position." Ethan heard the phrase clearly. "In your position." Lila's jaw tightened. Ethan said, "No, sir." Nolan kept smiling. "Then I am prepared to go to 200. "No, sir." "Son, you need adult guidance." "I have it." Nolan looked past him at Lila. "Ma'am, a minor cannot negotiate mineral interests in New Mexico without court supervision. I have counsel ready to challenge the transfer. If this becomes a fight, that hill will be tied up until your boy is old enough to have gray hair." This was the darkest moment. Not the auction, not the laughter, this. Because laughter ends when men go home, paper does not. Paper can keep coming. Paper can arrive stamped, certified, and folded around words a tired woman cannot afford to answer. For 1 second, Lila looked afraid. Ethan saw it, and that was worse than anything Nolan had said. Then Lila opened the screen door just wide enough for Nolan to understand he was leaving. "Mr. Voss," she said, "the land is not for sale." Nolan's smile vanished. He put his hat back on. "Then I will see you in court." He never did. Dr. Vargas made 3 phone calls the next morning. By Friday, a mineral rights attorney in Albuquerque had agreed to represent the Bells pro bono. By the following week, Nolan's legal threat had collapsed under 2 facts he had not bothered to check. First, Ethan had purchased the parcel with his mother's written consent as legal guardian. Second, the mineral rights had never been severed from the surface estate. The hill was his. The stone under it was his. And the man who had laughed had no paper strong enough to change that. Negotiations lasted through the winter. The biggest offers were the worst ones. One consortium wanted to buy the entire parcel outright and move fast. Another wanted exclusive exploration control with language that would have allowed them to tear the ridge open and walk away if prices dropped. A third offered enough upfront cash to make Lila cry at the kitchen table, then tucked a clause on page 14 that would have stripped the family of future royalties. Ethan did not understand every paragraph. But he had learned something from Stone: the first surface is not always the truth. So he read slowly. He asked questions, he made adults repeat themselves. He kept Aaron's notebooks beside him at every meeting, not because they were legal documents, but because they reminded him what proof felt like before it turned into paperwork. In March of 1989, the Bells signed with Mesa Verde Minerals, a small American firm that specialized in hard rock lithium and specialty metals. Mesa Verde did not offer the largest check, they offered the cleanest structure. A 3-year lease, a 3.75% gross mineral royalty. Surface disturbance capped at 5 acres at a time, full reclamation bond posted before drilling. The house lot an old line shack, protected in writing. And one clause Ethan asked for himself. Aaron Bell's original sample maps would be archived at New Mexico Tech after Ethan's death, not sold, copied, or buried in a company file. The signing happened in a conference room in Albuquerque with a window facing a parking lot. Ethan was 16 years old. His mother sat on his left. The attorney sat on his right. When the documents came around, Ethan signed his name slowly. Not because he wanted it to look important, because his hand was shaking. The first royalty check arrived the following January. $73,000. Lila laid it on the kitchen table and stared at it for 10 minutes. Then, she picked up her car keys and drove to the bank under the speed limit the entire way. They did not buy a mansion. They did not buy a sports car. They paid the back utility bills. They replaced the roof. They fixed the Dodge. Lila quit the hospital laundry but kept the bakery job because, as she said, if I sit at home with money, I will start inventing problems. Ethan finished high school. He was not valedictorian. He was not suddenly smooth. He still spoke too softly in class, still wore repaired glasses. Still drove the green Dodge when it would start, but people knew. In small towns, silence carries information better than announcements. The men at the feed store stopped calling Smelter Hill worthless. The county clerk remembered the coffee can. Ranchers who had laughed into their hands found reasons to look away when Ethan walked past. Nolan Voss tried one more time in 1990. He filed a nuisance claim through a limited partnership, arguing that the county had failed to disclose mineral potential before the tax sale. The judge dismissed it in less than an hour. There had been no county mineral survey. There had been no secret report. There had only been Aaron Bell's notebooks, 52 samples, a boy willing to read them, and the hill everyone else had been too certain to see. By 1992, Mesa Verde had opened the first controlled cut on the east side of the ridge. The operation was small, ugly, practical, and quiet. No giant pit. No boomtown. Just drill pads, trucks, sample sheds, and men in hard hats learning that the blue-gray hill was not done surprising them. Over the next 20 years, the Bell family royalties passed $19 million before taxes. That number matters for one reason. It proves the hill was not a one-time lucky flip. It kept paying, because the measurement was real. Through market drops, equipment changes, price swings, and years when the checks were smaller than expected, the deposit did what Aaron had believed it would do. It repeated. In 1993, Ethan used $250,000 to establish the Aaron Bell Field Scholarship at Western New Mexico University for students from mining, ranching, and mill families who wanted to study geology, surveying, welding, hydrology, or environmental reclamation. He did not put his own name on the fund. He put his father's name on it. When a local reporter asked why, Ethan said, "He did the looking. I only kept the papers from being thrown away." That quote ran in the Silver City paper under a photograph of Ethan standing at the Smelter Hill gate in a denim jacket, squinting into the sun like he wished the camera would leave. Merrill Gant, the lawyer who had laughed at the auction, wrote Ethan a letter 2 years later. It was only 4 sentences long. He said he had been careless with his laughter. He said men who live on paper sometimes forget that paper is not proof. He said he was sorry. Ethan wrote back one sentence. "Thank you for saying so." He folded the letter and placed it inside Aaron's first notebook. As for Nolan Voss, his land company folded in 1995, after 3 subdivisions failed and one bank called 2 loans early. People said he moved to Arizona and sold resort parcels near a dry lake bed. Maybe that was true, Maybe it was just the kind of story small towns tell when they want an ending for a man who made himself easy to dislike. Ethan did not talk about him. That was not the point was the hill. The point was the difference between the people who priced the surface and the man who read beneath it. Years later, after the mine slowed and the last strong dike was reclaimed, Ethan stayed in Grant County. He studied geology, then hydrology, then reclamation. He became the kind of quiet expert county boards call when a road is sinking, a well is failing, or a developer's report looks too clean. He married a schoolteacher from Bayard. They raised 2 children in a better house, but not far from the old one. Lila lived long enough to see the scholarship put its 100th student through school. When she died, Ethan buried her beside Aaron under a stone marker. So plain most people walk past it without knowing anything. Smelter Hill is quieter now. The gate still stands. The line shack still leans. The scarred cuts on the east slope have been filled and seeded with grass that only grows when the rain feels generous. On the kitchen table in Ethan's house there is still one peach-colored cardboard box. Inside are Aaron Bell's notebooks, wrapped in cloth. The first one opens to a page from 1984, where the red pencil line cuts across the ridge. And 4 words sit at the bottom. Not copper. Battery stone. Between that page and the next is a thin flake of purple mica, pressed flat and shining even after all these years. Ethan put it there the night the first lab report came back. He never moved it. So that is the story. A boy with a coffee can, a mother who trusted him once, a dead father's notebooks, and the hill that every smart man in the courthouse understood too quickly. They saw taxes, they saw dust, they saw a poor family standing where business people were supposed to stand. But Aaron Bell had taught his son the one thing nobody on those courthouse steps had bothered to learn. Paper can be wrong. Laughter can be wrong, a whole room full of grown men can be wrong. Stone keeps its own record. And it does not change that record, just because nobody important is looking.